Axis Mundi, stellar precession and mythology. The ancients saw the night sky differently than most of us do. There were no lights, and the galaxy was very visible. But the stars were amazing and so plentiful that it was hard to pick them out. Usually, the first constellation that children learn in the northern hemisphere is Orion. Orion is a rectangle of stars with a belt of 3 in the middle, looking like an hourglass. The group of stars, or constellation, was given a name and a shape in ancient times to make it easy to refer to and to remember. A person learns that Orion points to Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky. And we learn that Sirius is a constellation of a dog called in Latin Canis Major. Most children learn how to find north by tracing another line from the Big Dipper to a fainter star in the Little Dipper. The ancients named these Ursa Major and Ursa Minor, the Big Bear and the Little Bear. People learned later that when someone says, "What is your sign?" they mean to ask, "When is your birthday?" A sun sign or a natal sign is the constellation that the sun obscures on the day you were born. The ancients made stories and figures of the stars and constellations that were on the same plane as the sun, called the equatorial constellations. We inherited 12 constellations from the Babylonians and Greeks, although other cultures have made as many as 24. Even today, the study of personality based on the movement of the stars and planets, called astrology, is very popular and used not only for personality charts but to predict the future. Scholars made guides to track the movements of the planets through the night sky, but today we would use a computer instead of an ephemeris. Polar precession. In order to understand all of the ancient myths, we must first dive into a bit of astronomy. Most people understand that the Earth is a spinning ball in space. North for people is toward the North Pole, and the equator revolves around and around. The Earth is at the center of what is called the celestial sphere. The ancients often thought of this as a dome with stars painted on it. However, the Earth is not upright in its rotation, but tilted. The north celestial pole appears to be the pole star Polaris at the end of the handle of the Little Dipper. If we imagine the sphere around the Earth, the plane of the ecliptic, or the path of the equator, is also tilted. Sometimes the sun appears higher in the sky and sometimes lower. In the north, summer is when the sun is high, and in winter the sun is low. The problem with astronomy is that the ancients appreciated is that everything moves and nothing is perfectly aligned. If you remember, the way to find the faint North Star is to find the Big Dipper whose side points to it. The Big Dipper revolves around the pole star, appearing in different places in the sky throughout the year, forming a sort of nightly calendar. However, if we look into the night sky of the north, you can see a number of constellations around Ursa Minor. Between the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper, there is a constellation of many fainter stars called Draco, or the serpent and dragon. The great star Vega in the constellation of Lyra, or the harp, is close by. What people discovered is that the stars appear to shift in the skies over long periods of time. Over 26,000 years, the celestial pole drifts. In our lifetime, it points to Polaris, but 4,000 years ago, the pole pointed to Thuban, the third star in the dragon's tail. Over 12,000 years ago, the pole pointed to Vega, which will happen again in 14,000 years. This circle of precession is extremely long, but it is noticeable when we try to study ancient monuments, such as those of the Egyptians. In the present, the serpent is merely one of the pole constellations, but 4,000 years ago, the pole star was the dragon's tail, Thuban. The whole night sky was shifted, and to find north, one used the inner stars of the Great Dipper's cup and looked across to Vega. Rather than seeing the Big Dipper cycle through the seasons, people saw the serpent cycling around the axis of the world. Suddenly, many legends make sense, for over and over one sees the serpent either cycling the world tree or eating its own tail. Equatorial precession. There is another part of precession that affects us more rapidly. The great cycle of the celestial equator is divided into 12 sections, just like our calendar is divided into 12 months. The circle was further divided into 360 degrees, so each month has 30 degrees. Each of the 12 sections is dominated by a constellation. We know these constellations as the zodiac. In the West, our modern zodiac year begins in spring with Aries or the Ram constellation. People born in spring may be born under this sign, which is obscured by the sun, thus giving the name to birth signs as sun signs. However, due to the ignorance of astronomy by Westerners, the zodiac is fixed on Aries being at the spring equinox when it was in ancient Greece, about 200 AD. Because of the drift of the skies, the vernal equinox is now at about 5 degrees Pisces, not 0 degrees Aries. The equatorial precession is 1 degree every 72 years. Each sign rules the equinox about 2,160 years. 4,000 to 6,000 years ago, the equinox was ruled by Taurus and the autumnal equinox by Scorpio. Researchers in archeoastronomy have now figured out that some of the more famous monuments, such as the White Horse of Uffington in England, were aligned with particular constellations. East of the sun, west of the moon, and the silver wheel. One of the most stunning aspects of the night sky you can see only in the country is the galaxy. To the ancients, the galaxy was clearly visible, giving rise to the idea of a bridge or a river to the lands of the dead, who were stars in the heavens. The saying, east of the sun, west of the moon, was a reference to the magical world or the other world crossed by the bridge of the galaxy. One could also reach it by flying, carried by birds, or by the wind. The ones who knew the way were mortuary keepers, old women or men like Baba Yaga. However, one of the more interesting appearances of the galaxy is not as a bridge or an arc, but as a ring around the horizon. In ancient times, this ring or wheel could be seen in Europe. Now it can only be seen much further nearer to the equator. Here is an eclipse of the moon 4,000 years ago, where the galaxy appears as a bridge at moonrise, and by moonset, it appears as a silver wheel. Ancient goddesses were named after the silver wheel, which later changed to mean Corona Borealis, and the great star goddess is also retreated into this small constellation. In my other videos on mythology, I will talk more about the silver wheel and how it affects stories and ancient tales.